What's up, Facebook? Happy Tuesday. Rock Recovery Fitness coming at you live. Wait a few moments for some people to join in. In the meantime, I'll do what I always do and carry on conversations with myself. Just wondering if any of you guys have checked out our new YouTube channel. That's pretty exciting. Rock Recovery Fitness on the YouTube. So I did post that link in the above description. I do that every time. It's this way. It's always backwards on here. Anyways, so yes, I did post the link up in the description over here so you guys can check out that. So any of these videos that you miss or you come into them late, you always have access to them if you go to the YouTube channel, or you can find them back on our Rock Recovery Fitness Facebook page. So those are always available on there for your viewing. So the link is in there. Also posting again our new phone number for our peer services. So maybe you or a friend or someone you know could benefit from our peer services. We can hook you up with one of our wonderful peers. So the phone number is 585-622-4975. That number is also posted up in the description. You guys can also Facebook message us or email us. So yeah, if you looking for some support, again, we're always here, and I will encourage you guys every single day to reach out. So, hi Betsy, happy Tuesday. Nellie's on here. Hey Jake, how's it going? Glad you guys are all joining in. You guys are in here quick today. That's good. I don't have to talk to myself for too long. It's always kind of awkward. So today I want in our book discussion, trying to get a little bit more organized with these videos. But as always, I encourage you guys to be open and be vulnerable and respectful on here in your comments. But please, I always encourage you to comment. That's my favorite part on here. So looking forward to hearing from some of you guys today. So this is one of my favorite books that I kind of dug back up in my little collection that I don't touch very often, but now having some time to, sift back through some of those. So this is a book called Hopeful Healing. And these are short essays. Like each chapter is a short little essay. It's on managing recovery and surviving addiction. I'll give you guys a quick little look there. So that's by Mackenzie Phillips. Some of you may be familiar with her, but just to give you a little bit of a background, she also has another New York Times bestseller. It's her own memoir. It's called High on Arrival. And she brings her knowledge and voice to the subject of recovery for the first time. She is the daughter of the founder of the 1960s band, the Mamas and the Papas. And she grew up in a dysfunctional environment and subsequently battled a near-fatal drug addiction. And now she's a drug and alcohol counselor and an outspoken advocate for addiction awareness and education. So that's just a little bit of background on Mackenzie Phillips. So it is a really cool book. It does her other memoir, High on Arrival, is more about really her own story. But in this book, she does bring some pieces of her own story in there as well too, and just kind of something in the preface just to share with you guys before I go into today's reading. If I can find it, I had it in here. So Mackenzie says, in these essays, I've concentrated on the concepts and feelings that surrounded the recovery process rather than on the linear story of my life in recovery. I wanted to preserve the conversational foundation of these essays so that they would provide a genuine experience, and hopefully the person reading them would find a friend and some words that are helpful along their own journey. This is a wisdom-based book, not a clinical book. This is also a conversational book. While I do include some basic facts about substance use disorders, I make no claim to being an expert on all things addiction and recovery. I am, however, an expert in my own experiences of those two things, and it is in this that I have found the strongest connection with my clients and the recovery center where I work. So it's just to give you a quick little tiny overview of what this book is. And again, each little kind of chapter in here is really just a short excerpt of things from her own life and things that have helped her get through her own struggles with her own addiction. So the little piece I actually picked out today is about mindfulness. And I'm going to read it just as she has it written. I will do my best to censor any words since we are on Facebook Live here. But just being aware going forward too. And as I was kind of reading through this, I was kind of hesitant in some of the things I was picking and, some of the language that she uses too. But, It is also a good conversation starter and a good conversation piece about, bringing awareness to the stigma that does surround addiction, and the stigma to some of the language that we use, some of the language that people use to describe people with a substance use disorder, um, can sometimes really either break people down or build them up, depending on what language, we are using. So it's always really important to be mindful of that. Um, if anyone is interested in learning more about that, you guys can always Google William White. He has a lot of different essays and articles written on all things recovery, so all things in the peer world and addiction treatment. He's got some really interesting stuff. But I was kind of looking at some essays he had earlier on the language of recovery, and just really being able to advocate for that. But there was a quote he posted on here. It says, "Words are important. If you want to care for something, you call it a flower. If you want to kill something, you call it a weed." So again, it's just really being mindful about the language that we're using. And I will read exactly how it is that she posts, but there are words in here that she uses that even I would kind of question today, being in the recovery field. But this was the little section in here. This is about halfway through one of the chapters, but it was about mindfulness, and I just thought it was really important to share. So I'm going to jump in on that. Hi, Nikki. Glad you guys are on here today. All right. So Mackenzie says, another type of mindfulness is to be aware of the words you use, the way you phrase things. Do you phrase things always as either or? Are the word choices you choose always negative? Are you compassionate with how you describe yourself to yourself? Do you use language that lifts you up or pulls you down? Language and how we choose to use it is powerful. We can use it to bludgeon ourselves into an emotional pulp, or we can use it to open ourselves up to new and wonderful things. When you tell your story, listen for repeated phrases and words. The words you use to tell your story will also tell you about your self-talk and your perceptions of the world. Mindfulness is one of the most effective behavioral tools you will ever have for dealing with rising anxiety, stress, sadness, and myriad other emotions that can start you on a downward spiral of negative thinking. It's a healthy way to self-soothe that is about a gazillion times better than that other way you've been self-soothing. Ding, 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 drugs and or alcohol. If you are practicing sensory mindfulness, which is being bodily and environmentally aware, it can make things real in a way that offers you a deep connection with the world. Take a drive or go on a hike, and do it like you're embarking on a life-changing journey, because hey, you are. Go east in the morning and west in the afternoon. Pursue the sun. Look around you and be where you are. There is a trail I know of with evergreens bracketing the sides. They stand like beautiful mystics, frocked in green. Their trunks and branches stretch up as if in praise of the sun or the sky, or maybe God. They make a cathedral out of the trail. I like to find a place to sit and then take everything in, listen to the birds, and stay long enough to watch the lengthening shadows mark the passing of time like the gliding minute and hour hands of a giant clock. Mindfulness gives back the moments that you would have otherwise never noticed. The distortion of time, the negative perception of self and the world, steals wonder from you. It takes away the joy of gratitude. Mindfulness helps you get it back. It's always the goal. Internal mindfulness, which is to say mindfulness that pays attention to negative self-talk, watches for negative patterns of behavior and perceptions. It takes some doing because you have to break through the distortion of what you think versus what is true. You might be thinking, everyone is out to get me. But is it actually true? Break it down. Do you know everyone in the world? No? Then what you're thinking isn't true. If you are thinking you're worthless, ask yourself, how'd you go about figuring out if that's true? Treat it like a hypothesis. Do the facts support the claim? Have you ever made someone feel better with a hug? If so, you had worth to that person. Therefore, you aren't worthless. Challenge the shit out of your habitual thoughts and behaviors. Ask, why do I think that? Why do I do that? Get mindful about what's real and what's distorted. Addicts use all or nothing thinking. Everything's shit or everything's beautiful. We rarely walk the middle road. Negative thoughts can creep in, even in the middle of doing the most beautiful, sober AF activity out there. Here's the deal. You could get rid of the drugs and get rid of the alcohol, but if you don't work on your thought processes, you're not going to make a ton of progress. You're not going to be happy. If addiction is a disease of distorted perception and negative thought processes, then you're not left with a drinking problem, you're left with a thinking problem. Many of us are constantly talking to ourselves in negative ways, but we don't fully realize it. This negative self talk lives below the level of consciousness, so we're not aware that we're doing it until we begin the practice of self monitoring and self intervention. In the end, mindfulness demands acceptance of what is. You can't be mindful and regretful at the same time. You can be mindful of the regret, but the regret is not being felt. Being seen and being acknowledged, yes, but not felt. As you practice mindfulness, you'll notice that your ability to accept what you can't change gets easier. Through the doing comes the being. Practice mindfulness and let the rest flow through. And she does go on a little bit farther in that, and with that, I'm gonna kind of stop there, wrap it up a little bit. And at the end of each one of her little chapters, she has some final thoughts on that specific chapter, and then there's always a section called "It Works If You Work It," so some little take-home things. So I will read that. So some final thoughts on mindfulness. Remember, addiction is personal, and so is recovery. If you're trying to become mindful and the method you're using doesn't work, experiment with other methods until you find one that works for you. But don't wait for this to happen to you. Make a beginning, get into motion. It works if you work it. Practice mindfulness by finding a place where you can comfortably sit and close your eyes for 5 minutes. This can be indoors or outdoors. With your eyes closed, no peeking. Pay attention to all the sounds around you. Name them in your mind as you hear them. Meowing cat, driving car, wind in the branches. When the 5 minutes are over, notice how much more connected you feel to the place where you are than you did when you first sat down. You might be surprised as how much your perception changes when beginning to practice mindfulness. There is a world of possibility, and if you are willing to try, it's there to be experienced. And there is just so many other good things in that chapter too, but I really wanted to hone in on that, the one part about paying attention to how we phrase things, and again, the language we use. We kind of talked about that a little bit before I went into the reading, as far as the language talking about recovery. Even using the words, addict and alcoholic can carry some stigma to that too. And sometimes that can carry some really negative connotations. And just being aware of all the language that we use. How do we want to be viewed? And that actually really ties into what she was talking about in the very beginning, asking you, do you phrase things always as either or? Are the word choices you choose always negative? Are you compassionate with how you describe yourself to yourself? Do you use language that lifts you up or pulls you down? And those are great self-awareness questions, right? I'm always encouraging you guys to do these, self-check-ins throughout the day. And I think that, that's also important to do when we're sharing our stories with people. How do we describe ourselves? Are we focusing on these labels or brands that we give ourselves? Are we focusing on, diagnoses that we've been given? Are we just focusing on those? Or is there something deeper that's underneath that? More positive language that we can use to describe our own stories. Are the word choices you choose to use, are those always negative? Pay attention to the language that comes out of your mouth. And once we start having that awareness and we start catching that, we're able to hear more of it. And I think as humans, we all kind of naturally do that at times, even if, how many times does someone give you a compliment and we brush it away, or, we argue that compliment, that person's wrong for thinking what they're thinking. You know what I mean? It's not up to me to take charge of the way somebody else feels. That is their experience, and those are their feelings. I can't take control of that, but how quickly are we to even put down compliments that people give us? Where does that self-compassion kick in? How negative are you in describing yourself? And when you share your story, do you use hurtful words? Do you use harmful terminology that places a negative label on you? I hear a lot of people, and again, this is just me sharing. I'm also not on here as an expert either, but this is me just sharing my own experience. But, how are you describing yourselves? Do you go around using the words, oh, I'm just a junkie, I'm just an addict, I hear so many people doing that. And by doing that, it just creates this negative image over and over, and that's how society continues to view those of us who are in recovery and struggling with addiction, But there's just so much more that is underneath those words, those harmful words. Think about it. Like, who are you to other people in your life? You know, are you a mother? Are you a father? Are you a sister? Are you a brother? Are you a friend? Are you a neighbor? Are you a coworker? Are you a hard worker? Are you a giver? Are you a lover? Are you creative? Are you passionate? Are you funny? Any of these other hats that we wear in our lives, those more powerful ones, right? That quote I read you guys in the very beginning from some of the William White pages. Um, Words are important. If you want to take care for something, you call it a flower. If you want to kill something, you call it a weed. So it's all about the power in language, and the wrong words that we use sometimes can really stigmatize and disempower individuals, families, and communities. It's just so important to pay attention to the language that we not only use in public, and how we carry ourselves in the community, but your own language that you use in your head at home. you know what does your self-care look like up here? What does your self-love look like up here? When you make a mistake, are you yelling at yourself and cursing at yourself in your head? Or are you being kind to yourself? Check in with yourself. These are important things to really look at. Like Mackenzie said, language and how we choose to use it is powerful. We can use it to bludgeon ourselves into an emotional pulp, or we can use it to open ourselves up to new and wonderful things. So when you tell your story, listen for repeated words and phrases. The words you use to tell your story will also tell you about your self-talk and your perceptions of the world. So that's one of the takeaways. More of that self-awareness that I would love for you guys to pay attention to. That kind of takeaway for today is, as you're doing these self-check-ins throughout your day, pay attention to the other things that are going on in your head, how you're talking to yourself. There's times where I talk to myself out loud if I'm just doing the dishes, and I live alone, so I have casual conversation with myself. So not necessarily in that mindset. But when I'm in my head and in my heart, when I truly think of myself, am I using stigmatizing, really negative language? Or am I using language that builds myself up? If I think about it, if a friend or any one of you came to me and was struggling and say, oh, geez, I'm really struggling, and I made a mistake recently, and, I did this thing, and then this happened, and it was really horrible, and I'm such a mess up. If you came to me with all this negative language, I would probably not agree with you. I wouldn't tell you that you're a mess up. I would give you positive, encouraging, uplifting language, right? So think about that for yourselves. If you had a loved one, a family member, or your best friend came to you and said those same things, like, oh, this thing happened the other day, and I messed up, and, I'm such a screw up, how could I do that? How would you respond to them, right? You'd probably do the same thing. You would probably try to encourage them and love them and show them support, right? So why don't we do that with ourselves? It's so much harder for us to take our own advice and to be kind to ourselves. We can so easily do it with the ones we love, but when it comes to here and internal, sometimes we can be really harsh on ourselves. So I'm really challenging you guys to just continue to grow that self-awareness, continue to pay attention to the language you're using in your head and in your heart about yourselves, how you tell your story to other people. Where's the language you're using there? I love that she talks about practicing sensory mindfulness. So that's being bodily and environmentally aware of what's going on around you. So she says, take a drive or go on a hike. And I love that she says, do it like you're embarking on a life-changing journey, because, hey, you are, right? Those things are different for us. Or maybe they are things we've always done, but have we ever really been present or mindful in them? I love that. I love the idea of just going out and just sitting somewhere outside. So I'm curious if you guys, feel free to throw this in the comments too, but I'm curious if you guys have a favorite place in nature that you really enjoy. So one of my examples is Hemlock Lake, which for those of you who have never been is a little bit south of Rochester, kind of out near Honeywise, past Livonia a little bit. And I don't know why. Well, I do know why. I shouldn't say that. But that has just become one of my favorite places. And when I think about why that is, I pause for a second. And one of the things I love about being out there is the quiet. Oh my goodness. So I grew up out in the country, but I've lived in the city for quite a few years. And those of you who do live in the city, you know how noisy it can be 24/7, right? There is really no quiet. So when I'm sitting here doing my own mindfulness practices and listening to the sounds around me, I do hear the birds, but I also hear a lot of traffic, a lot of music bumping, a lot of motorcycles, a lot of sirens, right? All the city noises, which is fine. I can pay attention to those because those are still happening in the moment, and I can still be aware of them. It keeps me right here in the moment. But I prefer, going out to Hemlock Lake and oftentimes when I go out there, the water is just so calm. It's just like glass. It's just so smooth. It's just quiet. And the things that I hear often out there are really a lot of the birds, the wind sometimes. Every once in a while there's people kind of hiking out there, but it's usually a very quiet place. And that is honestly one of my favorite places just to go sit and practice that sensory mindfulness. And I don't know that I always had that awareness that that's what I was doing when I was going to sit by the water. Usually it was just kind of me taking a drive and getting out of the city and clearing my thoughts, clearing my mind, just kind of letting some of that stress and anxiety go. But I would do that. I would just go sit by Hemlock Lake and just watch the water. And then there was times where I would just kind of sit and close my eyes and like take in everything around me, take in that sensory awareness, that sensory mindfulness. And I love that. She says in the It Works If You Work It section, she wants you to practice mindfulness by finding a place where you can comfortably sit and close your eyes. And she says, pay attention to all the sounds around you. So you can go and name those sounds around you. So I do a different practice where I actually practice using non-judgmental. I won't even acknowledge the sound. I'll hear the sound in my head, but I'll do my best to try not to label what that sound is. So that's an even more difficult challenge for you. But if you're really kind of just starting out practicing mindfulness, go to a place where you like to sit. I encourage outside since we are in the springtime here, and it's well, I should be hesitant to say if it's going to snow again or not, because who knows. But since we are headed in the nice weather, I encourage you to find a place outside, whether you have a favorite lake or you have a favorite hiking trail, wherever those favorite places you are, please share them on here. It's really great to just, see new places that I haven't seen before, but share them with each other too. I love that you guys connect with each other on here. But take some time, maybe during the weekend or maybe, after work one night. Obviously things are a little bit different as to how we're living in COVID world today. So, please do them the responsible way. But, can you go to those places and can you just sit and can you take in all the surroundings, pay attention to the water or the trail that you're on or wherever it is that you are. Does that place have a special meaning? Are there special memories with people in your past of that place? Or is it just some place that's just beautiful, and really pay attention. And then close your eyes and just kind of sit. Pay attention to the way, the wind or the air, the temperature feels on your skin. Pay attention to the noises that you're hearing. Label them at the meowing cat, driving car, wind in the branches. Do you hear birds? Do you hear other animals? Do you hear leaves rustling? Do you hear water hitting the shore? Whatever it is, you can label those things. If you're looking for that extra challenge, listen to those sounds, but don't label them. Just listen to them. It's actually it's kind of crazy how quickly your brain actually wants to define that sound. It's so fascinating, but I like to kind of go that extra step and, try and force my brain to just be present. Don't label anything. That's an extra challenge. But she says you might be surprised at how much your perception changes when beginning to practice mindfulness. There's a world of possibility. And if you are willing to try, it's there to be experienced, right? Nature is always going to be there. There is always going to be those beautiful outside places that we can travel to. So I really encourage you guys to dive deep into some of that stuff. And for those of you who are, maybe struggling in early recovery right now, mindfulness was one of those things that really helped me. When I was feeling that anxiousness, when I wasn't calm and I was kind of all over the place and I was really stuck inside here, I was encouraged to, one, reach out to other people when I'm stuck in here, but also just kind of get up and do something different. And for me, I really took on that mindfulness. I would love just going to take a walk in the woods or some trails that I'm familiar with, or like I said, going to sit by Hemlock Lake, just little things like that, they just made a world of difference. And it's a practice, right? Sitting still for some of us is a real big challenge, right? I'm sure there's some of you that can relate. But like Mackenzie said, set a timer for 5 minutes. Start small. It's 5 minutes, right? It's 5 minutes. Just start there. And you eventually work your way up. And that's okay. You know what I mean? It's a practice like anything else. So the more you do it, the easier it gets. And the more I did it, the more I found I really enjoyed it. Just getting back outside and connecting with nature, So I'm going to check in with some of the comments real quick because I am babbling on and on. Lex says, this is exactly what I'm working on right now. That's awesome. Jake says, I just finished a self-help book very similar to this. I love it. It's called Unf Yourself, LOL. I've actually heard of that too. Curious how that is. I've heard that's actually the second person that's mentioned that recently. So there's a book you guys can check out. Lex says, I hope I can get that on Amazon. Awesome. Nikki says, great book. All right, so it sounds like a couple of you have read that. Good stuff. I love that you guys are sharing with each other on here. It just makes me so happy. Nikki says the new codependency is a great book too. More modern update of the original one, wrote in 1985. Awesome. And thank you guys so much for sharing. That's actually been happening a lot in these videos. People are sharing movies, and people have really been sharing a lot of different book titles too. So please continue to share those. Share where you got them or where the best price ones are. But yeah, thank you guys for sharing those resources. So I would definitely like to check those out too. Thank you for that. Jake says, I love this topic. Self talk is so important. Using assertive language rather than narrative. Talking in the now rather than speaking about doing things later. I am relentless versus I'm going to be relentless. The importance to me of positive self-talk can be the cause of a relapse. It's easy to obsessively think about using if I'm not careful or conscious of my thoughts. Absolutely, good point. Positivity is absolutely a mindset. It takes constant work though, but it definitely gets easier with practice. Yes, very good point. And that's it right there, right? We constantly talk about that. Any of these things that we do, right? It takes constant work. But also, like anything, if we put the effort into it and do it repeatedly over and over again, it gets easier, right? Yeah, a lot of good stuff in there. Thank you for sharing that, Jake. That importance of self-talk and talking about, the narrative that we use, using that assertive language rather than the narrative. I think sometimes we get, and I have definitely been guilty of this, but, I think sometimes we get stuck in, telling those same old stories that we've been telling about ourselves for years, right? Telling ourselves those stories that sometimes we embellish in our minds and sometimes we don't even do it consciously, but the language that we use or parts of our stories that we talk about, sometimes those can just be so detrimental and sometimes they're not even true, so we're very careful when we're telling our story to other people's, one to not trigger other people necessarily, but just having that positive mindset moving forward, more of that person-centered language than, focusing on the negative part of that and focusing on the addiction piece of that, some really good thoughts there, Jake. Melanie, hi Melanie. Melanie says this has been a great topic. Some of you guys are talking about the Kindle app. I always forget about that Kindle's still a thing. So Kindle books are cheaper than hard copies. That's good to know. Thank you for sharing that, Nikki. I know there's a bunch of other, there's one specific book app I'm thinking of, and I can't think of the name of it, but anyways, there's a lot of different apps out there where you guys can download books and listen to them rather than read them, just kind of different audio tapes on there too. So good stuff, guys. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for being honest. Some of this stuff isn't easy, right? We get into these mindsets and these behaviors that we've done for a long time. We've carried out most of our lives, right? And once we do that, we create these really deep pathways in our brains. And sometimes it's so hard to get out of those, get out of those behaviors that we've been doing for so long. It really takes a conscious effort and a practice, and that's why I'm always encouraging all of us, even myself. This isn't just for you guys, but this is, a reminder for myself too, to constantly check in with myself, and really pay attention to that language that I'm using. It's so hard. It's so hard for us sometimes. Like I mentioned earlier, like, what I mean? How many of us can honestly gracefully take a compliment? If someone compliments you on something, can you just simply say thank you and be genuine about it? Or do we really have that much, self-loathing and low self-worth that we have to argue their compliment? Who are we to tell that person that they're wrong? If they're genuinely giving that compliment, it's probably because they really feel it and believe it to be true. So can you work on being graceful and accepting those compliments? For some of us, it makes us uncomfortable to receive compliments. I don't know why that is. I'm still learning that about myself, I guess. But can we work on that? That's part of those self check-ins. That's part of that perspective shift, to even just do one little thing different. So when someone's giving you a compliment, can you gracefully just say thank you? Little things like that. Nikki says, yes, recovery is all about creating new stories to tell. Absolutely. And that's always going to change, right? The way I tell my story today sounds very different than how I told my story, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, 6 months ago, even a month ago, at the beginning of, all this pandemic life that's happened. Things even look very different today. So much has changed. And I hope not just for me, I hope for you guys too, but so much has changed within my thinking and internally in the last month that I'm just like baffled by it. And it almost seems to have changed a lot quicker than normal life, right? Because now I'm being forced to sit and to get quiet and to just listen for guidance and to really let go. That has been a huge struggle for me. I don't know about you guys, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't have to go around defining myself with all those terms that I used to, So I really want you guys to just, one, continue those self check ins with yourself multiple times throughout the day. Check in with how you're feeling. When you even check in, like, when you notice that you're feeling that anxiousness and those really uncomfortable feelings, like, check in with that. Like, what is that? What is it that I'm feeling? Why is it that I'm feeling? Is there needs that are not being met? Halt, right? Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Check in with those things. Is there something you need right now that's causing you to kind of act out a little bit? Something, and what can you do to kind of bring it back down? So yeah, continuing that self awareness, those self check ins, but also, in the grand scheme of things too, like in a larger sense, internally, I want you guys to pay attention to how you talk to yourself in your own head. We all do it, right? It doesn't mean that you're crazy and you're talking to yourself, but I mean the language that you use in your own head to describe yourself. And when you're sharing your stories with other people, do you want to empower your story? Do you want to set a positive example of, like, hey, like, this is what recovery can look like, Be aware of that language that you're using. We don't have to go around carrying all the terms that we've carried for so long that, you know what I mean? Like, that carries such a negative connotation. We don't have to describe ourselves that way. It's a conscious shift, but, I can describe myself as a person in recovery, and I can talk about all the other wonderful qualities that make up Chelsea, So how do you guys describe yourselves to other people? What other hats do you wear in your life? So just pay attention to that stuff. And the second one is, I would love for you guys to practice the it works if you work at peace, meaning, go sit somewhere, hopefully outside of your homes and out in nature somewhere, but somewhere just to sit. It can be inside too, that's fine, just somewhere quiet, and to just really slow down. Set yourself, if you're somebody who has a really hard time sitting still for 5 minutes, set a timer on your phone. Just set the timer, stick your phone on silent so you're not listening to all your ding ding, all your notifications from people. Put that stuff on pause for 5 minutes. It can wait, right? And just pay attention. Just sit and be aware of all your senses that are around you. Pay attention to, if you're outside, how the temperature is feeling on your skin. If you feel any wind, close your eyes and just really focus on your breathing. Focus on where all the points of contact that your legs or your butt or your feet, wherever you're sitting, however you're sitting, pay attention to all those points of contact between you and the ground. Listen to all the sounds. Label them in your head if you want to. And again, if you want that extra challenge, try not to label them. That's a fun one to do. But just be present and kind of take yourself from being up here and kind of being anxious and fear and worry and anxiety, right? A lot of people are really struggling with that right now. Just take it down a few notches and just sit and be present. And I guarantee the more you start doing that, you will find a true enjoyment in that. Or maybe you won't. I guess I can't tell you that. But I believe, for the majority, that you will find a peace in that. And there is something just so wonderful about just sitting and being present and connecting with nature. At least it has been my experience. And that doesn't work for everybody, but it's one thing that I'll share that has worked immensely for me, and things I still practice today. Like, I love getting out, going to take solo walks, little solo adventures. So, anyways, we are a couple minutes over time here, but that's all right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. So I think we'll do a couple more readings out of the Hopeful Healing book. So I'm gonna post that in the comments real quick, in case anyone wants to check that out. It is really a really great book. Yeah, it's interesting. She's got all her little essays that she's got in here is each chapter. And, it's interesting. The chapters kind of start off with, the very beginnings of recovery, defining addiction, finding its place in your own story. And it really moves through the different kind of stages of recovery, talks about resilience and hope. So if you have a chance to check it out, it's a really cool book, just to give you guys another quick look there. So we'll read a couple more essays out of that coming up in the next few days. And so yeah, thank you guys for joining in today. Again, all the information to contact us is in the description up above here. Our peer services hotline, again, that number is 585-622-4975. So Facebook message us, email us, tell us how we're doing, tell us how you're liking the videos or not liking them if you're not, what you'd like to hear more of. And Again, if you're looking to get hooked up with some support, you're really struggling, really going through it right now, or somebody else is, we're here. We're here for you guys. So please reach out. We're here to talk, and hang on to that hope. So I hope you guys have an awesome day, and I'll check in with you tomorrow. Bye.